In Silent Hill 3, we finally visit the long-awaited amusement park as Cheryl Mason. There are a lot of creepy things that are found here. Why is there a leg in the roller coaster operation room? Oh well, if we're going to find an actual mystery, surely there's no better place to look than a haunted mansion. I was always too afraid of these as a kid, so hopefully it doesn't have the second loudest jump scare in the series. Let's go inside and have a look around.
Welcome to the Borley Haunted Mansion. We're so glad you came. Please come inside and look around. When you feel you're ready, then go through the door.
The attraction mostly follows a detailed narration of fictional crime scenes. Like a tour guide, we can only proceed after we listen to each explanation. First, a small introduction segment at the entrance. Nothing special. Unlike anything else in the game though, this room is spotless as if deliberately cleaned very recently. Next, a disturbing story about a mentally ill man who murdered a family. There's a twist at the end where that story is revealed to be fake, and a silhouette of a suicide victim is shown through the curtain instead.
Do you know why he said he killed his family? Because I felt I had to! Anyway, I'm lying. It's all just a joke. I wanted to scare you, that's all. The truth is, only one person died. By suicide.
Suddenly nervous, Cheryl has second doubts regarding the legitimacy of this particular scene as she smells the familiar scent of blood. After this, we're free to head into the third room, where we're introduced to a man called Danny.
That's Danny. A quiet young man, but quite friendly as you can see. He was so eager to meet you. His hometown is New Orleans, but he came here after first losing his way. Oh, maybe you might know. Where is the path to heaven?
As said by the commentator, this is the body of Danny. Apparently he was a quiet, friendly young man from New Orleans. Now having lost his way in life, he's just a rotten, disgusting corpse. That's all the information we're given on Danny. Everything regarding him is both extremely scarce yet specific at times, making us wonder if he was ever real or in fact just a prop. If he is real, how did he die? Was he killed or is he related to the suicide victim in the other room? The mystery surrounding this man is unlike anything else I've ever seen in Silent Hill 3. Before I begin, the only other mention of a Danny or a Daniel in the Silent Hill series was a man named Daniel Shepherd, a resident of Shepherd's Glen, which was a small lakeside town off Toluca Lake. Already we know that there's no connection because this would mean that his hometown was already near Silent Hill and not in Louisiana. Honestly, the less I talk about Homecoming the better, but other than that, we're left with no lead as to who this person was or his affiliation with Silent Hill. There are a lot of theories that I aim to cover in this video. We'll start with some of the most common ones before giving my final conclusion at the end. Also, the haunted mansion doesn't end at Danny's room. The spike room and the hallway chase comprise the latter sections of the attraction, both of which may be used as evidence also. With that being said, let's go on to theory number 1. It's no surprise that many elements of Silent Hill 1's world were created by Alessa's trauma and fears, notably the dogs or the excessive display of imagery regarding death and childhood abuse. Now 17 years old with a new identity, Cheryl continues to fabricate these images to great extent in Silent Hill 3. At this point in the story, she has yet to destroy her memory, thus it would make perfect sense for a hanged man possibly symbolizing her recently deceased father to manifest. Or that's the theory, at least. Other pieces of evidence include the leg in the operation room, and the fact that the intro segment of Silent Hill 3 also takes place at the Lakeside Amusement Park. This is just a nightmare, similar to Harry's dream at the beginning of Silent Hill 1. Furthermore, the implications of suicide are overt throughout the haunted house, and the memory of Alyssa that we fight later on embodies her darker emotions trying to get the better of her, essentially meaning that Cheryl is suicidal. The reason why I don't think that Danny is a product of Cheryl's imagination is simply because of the information regarding him that shows no resemblance to her dad, or really anything else in the game. This man was beckoned to Silent Hill from his hometown in New Orleans. Both his age and origin have nothing to do with Cheryl. Basically, she has no reason to make it up, and it's far too specific. I strongly believe that this man is in fact a real person, separate from any and all paranormal interference. So we now know that Danny is real, but we have yet to distinguish him from the other props, specifically the doll and the rocking chair in the same room. Basically, we don't know which one Danny is. Presumably he is the one hanging from the ceiling, of course, but by examining the doll on the rocking chair, Cheryl second guesses herself again, bringing us back to square one. That's just a doll sitting in the chair. Is Danny the doll, or is Danny that hanging thing? Oh well, whatever, no biggie. There are a few things that stick out to me about this interaction. The first is that the commentator didn't disclose much regarding the criminal in the previous room, more so the crime itself as opposed to the individual, but suddenly he's now prepared more of a backstory. The premise of a young adult travelling to Silent Hill with nowhere else to turn heavily relates to the premise of Silent Hill 2 and its characters, James, Eddie and Angela. It just seems too coincidental for a fake story meant for an amusement park attraction. This is quite a cool side detail actually. We can take a quick look outside and notice some gravestones at the entrance. Maybe these have some names on them. Silent Hill 2 has a similar cemetery at the Historical Society, with the names of the three aforementioned characters and Walter Sullivan's grave on the right hand side. Maybe we can find something similar here. I know it seems fake, but it also wouldn't be out of place for Silent Hill to use a childlike, light-hearted decoration to convey a message of death despite its subtlety. Unfortunately, the writing is consistent with every gravestone, the lack of interaction and ironic display of pumpkins clearly demonstrating that they're nothing more than props after all, but it was still worth a mention. Just to prove that this is 100% Danny, the doll on the chair doesn't look young at all. Grey hair, obvious wrinkles, he looks a lot like James's dad Frank Sunderland from Silent Hill 4. I would say that it looks over 50 years old. The other man, however, looks much younger, just from the hair and skin texture, maybe late 20s to early 30s. A quick Google search will undoubtedly clarify that Danny has always been associated with the man on the ceiling and not the man on the chair. With that out of the way, there's still the possibility of Danny being nothing more than decoration. I know that's the first thing that anyone would automatically assume, including myself, but he isn't. By interacting with the body, Cheryl immediately acknowledges the magnitude of what she is now looking at, differentiating between Danny and the prop on the chair that she doesn't really care about. By interacting a second time, she points out that Danny's body has started decomposing. This means that he was on the roof for maybe a few days before Cheryl arrived, and he wasn't placed here on a moment's notice. Very sickening to think about. Now that we know about Danny's fate, that this is a real dead body of a man who arrived in Silent Hill previously and didn't make it out alive, we need to find out his cause of death. Like the man in the other room, did he commit suicide? Did he die in the haunted mansion? Was he murdered? Let's find out. By far the most popular theory regarding Danny's death was that he died in the Spike Room. The Silent Hill 3 wiki has even declared this the most probable. It's true that this was designed to kill anyone who entered. In our case, Cheryl was just short enough to avoid it. On hardest difficulty though, we do have to duck down in order to survive. Maybe Danny was a hardcore gamer and was simply playing on hard mode. In all seriousness, this is a very logical explanation at first glance. It would instantly explain the injury on his upper body, which seems to be a laceration on his neck or head. One of these spikes could have grazed his neck on the way down. It would explain why his body was repurposed into a jump scare. The Spike Room is right next door, and whoever maintained the mansion definitely put a lot of effort into keeping it neat and tidy. Due to the cleanliness of the entrance and the props, the special effects and animatronics are still fully operational despite 99% of the Lakeside Amusement Park being dilapidated and aged beyond recognition. I have a small theory that the narration isn't a recording that plays periodically upon entry, but that it's actually a live broadcast in a studio environment. The person behind it is hiding somewhere inside the walls. Something like a Lucas Baker from RE7, but we'll never know.
Alright, what do you say we play a little game? All you gotta do is light the candle and put it on the cake.
Kiss my ass.
Ethan, language. There are children in the building.
If it is true, then it would explain how Danny's body ended up on the roof a few days after he was initially killed by the spikes, because who else could have done this? I will say that the language used in the chase section would never be acceptable in an amusement park. We can let slide the family of 4 who died or even the hanged man. Disneyland used real skeletons on its Pirates of the Caribbean ride. It's been long confirmed by employees that some of them still remain to this day. These rides are designed for older kids and adults anyway, but he explicitly tells us to die near the end.
Dying is much easier than living.
Glorifying death and insinuating suicide in the audience, not for educational purposes, but telling people to die, would not be legal in real life. It has to be a live broadcast. The reason why I don't think that Danny died in the spike room is because of these weird messages on the walls where someone's asking for help. These are found in the second room, and there's some in the hall near the end. If we assume that Danny wrote the messages, it means that he was already injured when he arrived, and because they're also found after the spike room, it means that he survived the spikes before succumbing to injury. Overall, there's too much evidence against the spikes having anything to do with his death, in my opinion. So, if the spikes didn't kill Danny, what did? A possible theory is that he was killed or injured by the enemies surrounding the amusement park. Maybe the dogs, the closers, or even the rabbits. We know per Silent Hill 4 that these bunnies have a mind of their own. There is also an unlockable t-shirt called Killer Rabbit, obtained in New Game Plus, but I may be digging too deep on this one. It's a simple yet very logical theory. It's certainly more plausible than the spikes, in my opinion. Many people have drawn parallels between the man who hanged himself and Danny. Are they the same person? In this case, Danny wasn't murdered at all and he actually killed himself, but the silhouette clearly shows him hung from the neck and not tied upside down like Danny is. Regardless, this credits the theory that he was murdered by the commentator or an enemy. Something I forgot to mention is that the commentator could be related to the elevator quiz show host from Silent Hill 2.
Hi there, everybody! Thanks for tuning in. Welcome to another exciting edition of Trick or Treat!
This mansion is quite old, so please watch your step. Sometimes the floor suddenly gives way, and beneath the floor, there's nothing.
When comparing the two, they don't sound that similar, but it's more in a way that both voices seem forced to fit their respective roles. A quiz show host and a haunted mansion narrator are contradictory enough to shroud their real voices. The expressions are on completely opposite corners to draw any similarity. If they're not the same person, they could still be relatives or associates. Maybe I'll go more in depth in another video. Of course, this could all be a cover-up. What if Danny actually had a reason to be in Silent Hill besides this BS story of him losing his way? He was obviously strung up and used as an example. An independent journalist or investigator, like Douglas Cartland or Joseph Schreiber. Someone who was investigating Silent Hill and was silenced by the Order, as we've seen numerous times. The disgusting mistreatment of Danny's body makes this theory harrowingly possible. It's a hate-fueled, orchestrated desecration disguised as entertainment. Although I couldn't find anything else to substantiate this theory, it's entirely possible nonetheless. Let's start from the beginning and learn more about Danny's story leading up to his passing. Like many of Silent Hill's victims, he fled from New Orleans to Silent Hill while struggling with perceived mental illness or to run away from his problems in life. Like Eddie or Angela, depending on the context. Losing your way is another way of saying that someone has lost their mind. Now for one more look at the suicide victim. No information is given about him personally, probably because it continues in the next room. This man is symbolic of Danny and his motives. The commentator says, maybe you might know where is the path to heaven. Because of what Danny did, he is not welcome into heaven. That brings us to another piece of evidence, the newspaper in the subway. Although just a random interaction for most, it talks about suicide victims and their tendency to seek humans for salvation. It also talks about possession, of replaying the memory of their death and the time that it occurred. For Danny, his only hope of salvation is to possess Cheryl because he's not welcome anywhere else. He killed this family because he felt he had to. This isn't the mind of a sane person. He was clearly suffering from paranoid schizophrenia or another serious mental illness such as this. The commentator says that the story is a lie, before stating that only the man who committed suicide was a real event. I believe that both of these things really happened and that the stories are connected, and that this man, Danny, killed himself after the guilt of his actions became too strong. Cheryl once again agrees with this theory as we examine the crime scene after the narration ends instead of proceeding onwards. So that whole family murder thing was just made up. But if that's true, how do you explain all the blood in this room? Could it be that the guy who committed suicide really did kill a bunch of people? Oh, how could I be so stupid? This is a haunted mansion. Of course it's all made up. What was I thinking anyway? But if it's fake, why does it smell like real blood? Already there's a small inconsistency in Danny's story, but I have an explanation. This crime scene isn't where the family was murdered. That was back in New Orleans, of course. This is just the memory of Danny hunting that particular place. The messages on the wall give us even more evidence in support of this theory. Help could be symbolic of his worsening mental illness that ultimately ruined his life. It could also refer to his soul trapped in purgatory as opposed to a literal cry for help. Now for the evidence against this theory. As said previously, the suicide victim is hung in a different way than Danny is, making it much more likely that he was murdered instead. But what about the wound on his neck? We could speculate that these are leftover wounds from his suicide before he was cut down and brought here, but it doesn't look like a noose bruise. Sadly, this looks like someone else did this, which would disprove this theory entirely, but I could be wrong. Secondly, Danny isn't the only ghost that haunts this mansion. According to the commentator, multiple ghosts have taken an interest in Cheryl and want her to stay with them forever.
That was supposed to be the exit, but it seems that no one wants you to leave. Everyone really likes you. They want you to stay with them forever.
I can let this slide if he's specifically alluding to the family of 4 and not that Danny and the suicide victim are separate entities. So that about sums up this mystery. If I were to lean on one of the latter theories as my conclusion, I would probably say with confidence that he was an investigative journalist who was murdered by the Order, and they subsequently decided to make a mockery out of him. The help messages on the walls could then be considered decoration or another twisted game devised by the commentator to garner a reaction out of Cheryl. But what do you think happened to him? I'll never forget the first time the jump scare got me. It was second only to the bathroom in Silent Hill 2. Any suggestions at all, by the way, please send them to my email on my about page.